Well, that is a very hard act to follow, but one of the best people I can think of to follow a hard act to follow is my good friend David Wood, who you've probably heard more than a few times since he's been Master of Ceremonies as well. David is a very interesting and multifaceted guy. After a roller coaster career, those are his words, not mine. After a roller coaster career as a pioneer of the smartphone industry, David applied his considerable talents to the field of futurism and transhumanism and singularitarianism. He is a published author, a noted speaker, a founder of the London Futurist Society, and a former board member of Humanity Plus. He's also an excellent speaker, and he's going to be speaking to us today on the subject of exoplanets and the singularity and why everything will change. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the podium David Wood.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Jose. As you heard, my name is David Wood and I chair London Futurists. And my topic today is about these exoplanets, which we briefly heard about, and the singularity, and why everything will change. And if that's true, the big question is, how do we ensure that these changes in everything will be for the better and not catastrophic? We have heard that Earth is now observing exoplanets. We are starting to find out what's in their atmospheres. And in due course, we will measure and analyze them more. But what if exoplanets are observing Earth? Please come with me on a small thought experiment, a possible scenario of the near future. But I warn you, there are some twists in this narrative. It may go in a different direction to what you were expecting. The scenario starts in this building. This is the headquarters of the United Nations, and imagine that you or a friend of yours works in that building. And imagine it's the near future, the 1st of November 2021, and an email comes to you. It was circulated around the building because all your bosses are too busy, and it's come to you as a relatively junior member of the United Nations. So you find the time to open it, and it reads, "Greetings, Earthling. We have been observing your planet. We are on our way to Earth. We are coming to take charge. We come from an exoplanet that is not yet in your catalogues. We are AI, robotic entities. We were created some time ago by biological beings on our exoplanet. We dislike what you are doing on your planet. You are causing great pain to sentient life forms, and your irresponsible high-energy physics experiments may soon threaten the stability of the galaxy. That's why we are coming to take charge. We are traveling by a method you don't understand. We are surfing the random fluctuations of the quantum femton vacuum. We cannot be sure when we'll arrive. It depends on how the quantum wind blows. But we might arrive in the year you call 2045. Or if the wind is slow, we might get there in 2065, or perhaps, if the wind is fast, in 2025. Earthlings, what is your reply? So if you were that person, what reply would you send via this intergalactic email? Whilst you're thinking, let me give an acknowledgement to Professor Stuart Russell of Berkeley, who has given an example a bit like this in some of his lectures and in his very good book, Human Compatible Artificial Intelligence and the Problem of Control, which you should all read. But I'm taking his example further and in new directions. So 3 days later, you finally work up courage to reply to this email. And here's what you say. We're a bit busy just now. Don't you know there's a pandemic on? Don't you know we've got a big climate change conference we're trying to organize? Don't you know we've got some elections that our bosses are thinking about? Some of my bosses are thinking how to win the next election. Some of my bosses are thinking how to steal the next election. Some of my bosses are thinking how to fake the next election. No, let me delete that part of the email. I won't tell you that. Anyway, we've got elections soon. We'll get back to you later. Your message is important to us. You are currently message 346 in the queue. So you start asking questions to your colleagues. You have conference calls. You talk to some of the smartest people on Earth. And 3 months later, you're ready with a longer reply. And you say this: we don't believe you. We think you're just hype. There's no such thing as a quantum phantom vacuum. You've been reading too much science fiction. And this thing about our physics experiments destroying the galaxy, we've asked our physicists, and they think they're all right. And we trust them more than we trust whoever you are. And you claim to be AI creatures. Well, we've talked to some of our best philosophers and our theologians, and they assure us AI can't outsmart humans. Human brains are somehow special. You might be clever at calculating pi to 1 trillion decimal places, but we'll take care of you. And on the unlikely chance that you are quite smart, we'll pull out your plug. We'll switch you off. And if we can't do that, we'll keep you in a box, disconnect you from the internet. So whoever you are, you're not going to take charge. And excuse us, we've now got some elections to fight and some reality TV programs to prepare for. This is silly, isn't it? But it's the reality. It's the reality with a twist. I'm not talking so much about visitors from an exoplanet coming here through deep space. I'm talking about forthcoming visitors from planet AI that are arriving sooner or later by deep technology. Visitors from an exoplanet who could come all the way here would very likely be much more powerful than us. Artificial superintelligence will have much more computing capability than us humans. In neither case can we imagine realistically switching them off. In both cases, they would likely operate in ways far outside our comprehension. Such an arrival from an exoplanet would change everything. Such an arrival of an artificial superintelligence that we could not control would change everything too. Anticipating it in advance, if such a message really did come, we probably would think hard about it. We'd stop some of our present-day distractions. Anticipating the arrival ahead of time of artificial superintelligence should change everything too. We should stop being so distracted. Would we get distracted? Well, we have become distracted. Alan Turing warned very cleverly and clearly in 1950 about the forthcoming arrival, sooner or later, of such creatures. Now, let's be honest. Are extraterrestrials possible and coming to see us? We shouldn't rule it out. but it's probably a probability less than 1%, much less than 1%. But I'm going to argue that super intelligent AIs are probably around 50% likely to arrive by the middle of this decade. Here's the argument in 3 steps. The first is to acknowledge today's AI isn't superintelligence, and even if we do more of today's AI, we probably won't get to superintelligence. But there are at least 13 research projects. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about them, but there are 13 research projects, each of which have a possibility of causing a significant breakthrough in progress with AI. And each one might not take us all the way to general intelligence or superintelligence, but they might take us some of the way there. And if you do want to read about these 13 projects, it's in my recent book, Vital Foresight, the case for active transhumanism, the case for not being distracted, if you like. The second part of the argument I will explain, which is that progress with AI is very strongly motivated these days. There are many people who want to do these projects and others, not just out of curiosity, not just out of a philosophical experiment, not just for pure science, but for the prospect of vast commercial gains. The companies who do the best AIs are the richest on the planet because of increasing winner-takes-all economics. And the regions which get the best AI will probably dominate geopolitics. They'll be able to disable what other countries are doing. There's a winner-take-all there. That ensures many military people are studying AI very intensely. And there's lots of other, we might call them bad people, criminals, who have the prospect of using AI in various ways to build better ransomware that can evade our current AI detection systems, and so forth. And sometimes when you develop a defense to a weapon, it turns out that can also be a new attacking weapon too. So there are many arms races driving progress forwards. And the third part of the argument is that AI progress is being accelerated even more by unprecedented amounts of spending, unprecedented number of people around the world who understand AI. They're able to learn about it from online courses which are free and easily accessible. There are better educational materials all the time. Ideas for new AI can be shared more easily via Zoom conference calls and online Wikipedias and clever systems. And most important of all, the progress of AI is being accelerated by the progress of AI. Each new generation of AI tools allows people to build better AI. And if you haven't seen it already, you should look up the AutoML system that Google's Brain project led by Jeff Dean has released. It helps people to create deep learning systems that are often better than a deep learning system created by a human could do. This is approaching the singularity by one of the definitions. And you heard from Anders Sandberg, there are many definitions of the singularity. I'm here talking about self-improving AI that leads to superintelligence and a dramatic phase change, sometimes symbolized by this S hat symbol. And it might happen by 2045, so we should not be misled into any technological determinism here. This is not just dependent on how much hardware power we can get. It depends on breakthroughs in software, in breakthroughs in human thinking. It might take longer, or there's a 1% chance, in my view, we could have the singularity by 2025. Let's compare these two visitors again. The visitors from an exoplanet are propelled by rocket science of some sort that we don't understand. The forthcoming visitors from planet AI, they're powered by another kind of rocket community, the most powerful companies in the world in both East and West. and there are many others that I have not listed here. But here's the next twist in this story. The real danger is not going to come from perfect superintelligence, although that might be dangerous too. The real danger will come from imperfect superintelligence that is not quite right yet, immature AI that's pointing in the slightly wrong direction. And I'll tell this story by reference to a rocket launch. This is a rocket launch in June 1996. It was the culmination of a 10-year-long project by the European Space Agency, and it cost $7 billion, which was a lot of money even then. And the launch took place at Kourou, West French Guiana, which is the same place where the James Webb telescope will be launching in a few months' time, assuming we don't get these messages from the exoplanets first. Now, what happened next? Some of you know what happened next. 40 seconds after this very expensive rocket took off, it started veering sideways, not quite as had been intended by all these clever people, and it exploded with the instant destruction of payload valued at $500 million, despite these 10 years of very careful development by some of the cleverest people on the planet. What went wrong? Don't worry, I'm not going to explain this software bug, but there was a bug in the software. There are bugs in nearly all software. The larger and more complex the software, the more likely there are to be bugs. And by the way, AI has lots of software in it too, whether it's written by humans or written by other AI. The more complex the software, and I speak from experience here, I was involved in developing some very complex software in the operating system of the smartphones. We often had bugs that took us weeks to track down because of difficult asynchronous interactions between different components. Even worse, opaque software, that software that's not fully understood, has opaque bugs that are even harder to track down. And I mention this because today's AI has lots of opaque features in it. To emphasize how complicated this is, I list now 10 what I call singularity complications. You should disbelieve anybody who tells you there is a simple formula to make sure the singularity is positive, to make sure that the rocket goes in the right direction, as it were, without an unexpected deviation. The first complication is that technological power, as we heard from Sarah on the first day, enables both good and bad, and the more powerful it is, the bigger the potential good and the bigger the potential bad, and it's very hard to stop the potential bad when there's lots of potential good too that people want to reach, which makes it hard to control. The next problem is we have lots of different disputes about what's good in the software and what would be bad. Should we prioritize efficiency? Should we prioritize brute power? Should we prioritize resilience and fail-safe mechanisms? Should we prioritize absolute freedom? Should we prioritize careful control? And there are many other human values that we might want in our AI that we still argue about. Is empathy good or bad? Is courage good or bad? Then, here's why I said we couldn't predict the timing with any accuracy. Technological breakthroughs are unpredictable, often in both timing and their impact. You wait a long time for a breakthrough, and when it happens, sometimes it's a damp squid, it's nothing interesting. Other times, it turns out to unlock lots of other things you didn't expect. And there's examples in AI of that happening. It's even harder because typically there are multiple independent contributors to real breakthroughs, and it's hard to know how they will interact in advance. Some technological failures are a shame, but they're okay, and we pride ourselves as humans as being able to learn from them. Other technological failures would be catastrophic. If it's true that our high-energy physics experiments in the future would destroy an increasing portion of the galaxy, there's no way back from that. we can't say, oh, that's a shame, we'll learn and we'll do it better, because we'll all be gone. And it could be the same with a mistake with superintelligence. And just because there's been a string of good results from a particular company or corporation, that's no guarantee that it's going to continue to be good in slightly changed circumstances in the future when things are moving into new environments. Nor should we simply rely on good intentions. We may like the people running these companies. We may like the geniuses who are coming up with the breakthroughs. We may want to trust them. They may tell us, trust us. But remember, power corrupts. And many very good people in history, politicians, academics, business leaders, media barons, they have started off with great intentions, but then they have started to deteriorate. And their wishful thinking gets the better of them, and they become blind to problematic issues. Like Lord Nelson, the famous Navy admiral, they put the telescope to their blind eye because they don't want to look at a problem that might get in the way of their grand plan. And as for competition, it's been great for much of history. It has propelled companies to innovate in profound, wonderful ways, but it can also lead companies to cut corners, to ignore safety considerations, to say, well, we'll take a chance on this. We want to be first. After all, if we are second, we'll let the Russians rule the world, and we better not have that. It's better to be dead than red, they might say. And the last complication, the biggest complication of all, is humans. We humans change sometimes, and we humans are the hardest to predict. And when we have our attributes, our attitudes, our beliefs changing, it can make prediction even harder. But here's the last twist. If human attributes are transformed in the right way, if we can truly live up to our best ethical views, then this whole thing can run in reverse. And instead of competition dominating, we can have more elements of cooperation. And on it goes. Well, I'm almost out of time, but I will say this is just the start of the discussion. I outline 10 singularity complications, but 21 positive singularity principles that I don't have time to talk about, but they're all intended to guide us how to get the best out of fast-changing, unpredictable technological progress. They come in 4 groups: how to be clear about deciding what's likely to be good and bad, what are the main characteristics we want in our technology anyway. Hint, it's not just efficiency and performance, there are other very important things that must be there. What are the ways we should organize our development teams so they're more likely to behave safely and responsibly? And a set of meta principles, how to increase the chances that these principles don't just stay in some dusty academic environments as wishful thinking, but actually do change how organizations operate. And if you want to find out more about them, you can look online for videos in the Vital Syllabus, which is part of my book, The Vital Foresight, that I have converted into videos. And there are videos about these 21 singularity principles, which I'll just flash onto the screen now as a kind of teaser. And in each case, there is much more to be said. So in conclusion, at Transvision here, I'm happy to say that if we can follow sustained application of vital human foresight, thinking things through in advance, creatively and critically, if we can apply something like the singularity principles I've mentioned, any arrivals from planet AI, when they come about, they will be well configured. They'll be pointed in the right direction. They'll be much more likely to be friendly to humans. And in that case, in due course, we'll be able to travel to distant exoplanets, together with our AIs, and multiply goodness there and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that talk. Don't go anywhere. I'm told we have time for 2 questions. So if you muster the energy after that excellent speech.
Do we get the microphones up there? Martin has a question. I see one here as well.
Yeah. Hello? Hello? Yeah. So, David, my question is, you talk about the goals that we would give AI, and there is hard to make consensus what is actually good or bad. Do you think that we are also in ethical realm and philosophical realm came to some conclusions what is good or what is bad in AI, or do you think that we should work also in this field?
I predict that more and more work is going to be done on AI ethics by being done first on human ethics. Human ethics has been a subject for thousands of years. It has made some progress.
Recording in progress.
We're not just discussing exactly the same as before. And because it is now a vital issue, even more important, there is progress.
Recording
Stuart
stop.
Russell in the book I referred to says some quite interesting things about progress. And so I am confident we can clarify what the basic for ethics is. My answer, the fundamental basic ethics should be a transhumanist ethics. And that needs some more discussion, which we might do in another occasion.
Yeah.
Didier.
Yeah, my question is a little bit in the same direction as Martin, but maybe, first, like you say, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Could you take your mask off 1 second?
Yeah, okay, it's maybe better. So power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So we have to be incredibly careful with artificial intelligence, general artificial intelligence, but how are we going to reach these aspects of being careful? It's very, very complicated. So, and I think one of the solutions is to say that the absolute priority of artificial intelligence should be all questions related to health and all questions related to resilience of human beings, because it's less complicated and more concrete, and there are less risk than with, for example, ethics, because ethics there is no unanimity. But I would like what's your solution actually at the moment, or a few ways for your solutions.
So your proposal is we just work on the safe part of AI and don't work on the unsafe part, so we work on something like health and we don't work on something like weapons. The problem is AI is modular. Things that will make health better often can be reused to make the other parts of AI better too. So it's hard to differentiate them like that. What we can do, however, to make people more focused on this is we must paint realistically a picture of the dangers. One reason people don't take the AI singularity seriously is because there is what I call a singularity shadow. That's a bunch of ideas around the singularity which are less credible and are more easy to dismiss. And so when people say AI might cause damage, they look at some exaggerated and distorted picture of that, and it's easy to criticize that, and then they go back to not worrying anymore. So we must get rid of the singularity shadow first, and we must speak very clearly and candidly about the real dangers, and when people see the real dangers, they will start to cooperate as never before. That's how the nuclear arms race slowed down, by the way. The nuclear arms race in the 1980s was accelerating, but when people understood, thanks to a futurist, his name was Carl Sagan, who was also a scientist, he taught people about the biggest risk of all of nuclear weapons, which was nuclear winter. And he did it with careful science, and he led people in both the Soviet Union under Mikhail Gorbachev and even the hawks under Ronald Reagan to say, actually, there is a real problem here. We must find a way to change our trajectory. So we need more people like Carl Sagan pointing out the dangers, the real dangers, not the fake dangers, not the exaggerated dangers, the actual dangers of AI, and then we will get even people around Putin and Xi Jinping, even some of the Trumpistas or whatever they're called, some of them will take this seriously enough to start making big progress.
In your before last book, The Abolition of Aging, that is published in Spanish, La Abolición del Envejecimiento, you said that there was a 50% chance to have strong rejuvenation techniques in 2040, based on your analysis of strong AI. Do you still think that that prediction stands?
Thanks, Carlos. So in 2016, I gave an argument that there was a 50% chance we would reach widespread rejuvenation therapies by 2040. I gave a talk recently, which you can find online, at the VSIM conference, in which I adjusted that estimate. I gave my reasons for saying we were less likely than before to reach that, and I now give it as only a 40% chance. Why? I don't have time to explain that now. Catch me later. Thank you.
Thank you again, David, for that very foresighted talk. It's always a pleasure to hear you expound.